Worms. They're pretty gross, right? I mean, you either think they're gross or you don't think they're gross. Maybe you're like me and you didn't think they were gross until you started working with them, and then you realized the truth. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's Dominic, and today I'm going to be talking about vermicomposting. Basically what vermicomposting is turning garbage into compost with worms. Hopefully by the end of this video you'll be able to make your own worm bin and produce your own vermicompost for your plants. So if you're interested, keep watching. There are so many benefits to using vermicompost on your plants. The Urban Worm Company website has a pretty good list of things that it can do. Pathogen suppression, nutrient delivery, water retention, increased microorganism populations, pest suppressions, just to name a few. Obviously, vermicompost is something that you want for your plants, and I personally am gonna use my vermicompost on my plants sometime, whenever the vermicompost is ready. Now there's different types of composting worms, but red wigglers are the most common, and so that's what I used. Now when learning what to put inside of your worm bin, you're going to come across two terms, and the first one is browns and the second one is greens. Let's go over what they mean right now. Browns are known as the bedding of the worm bin, and they're high in carbon. Things that you could use for browns in the worm bin include corrugated cardboard, newspaper, peat moss, coconut coir, and egg cartons. The greens, it's really good. The greens are the food scraps, and they're high in nitrogen. Things that you could use for greens in a worm bin include lettuce, cucumbers, banana peels, and tea bags, like the whole tea bag. Like you could put an entire thing, a tea bag, in the worm bin. Now you're gonna want a carbon to nitrogen ratio of around 50:1, okay? So that's like 50 parts carbon and then 1 part nitrogen. For more info about browns and greens, and specifically browns, check out this video right up here. Now that we've got all that covered, let me walk you through my process in making a worm bin. Let's go over the materials first. So I decided to make a 3-tote system, and I'll explain why in a second. For this system, you'll need 3 bins, 1 lid, a spigot, something to act like spacers, I use jars, and a drill with different drill bits. I followed the directions from a video by Epic Gardening, and I'll link that video down below if you want to check it out. Remember to pick non-see-through bins because worms don't like light. They breathe through their skin, so obviously if the sun's beating down on them, then they can dry up and die, so they naturally move away from it. So just don't get clear bins, get non-see-through bins. Now you're going to start with the holy bins, okay? Why are they holy, you ask? Well, because they're, yeah, okay. I get it. Sorry, bad joke. You get it? Because they're holy? They're like holy, but they're... Okay, never mind. Start by drilling the holes in those 2 bins, okay? So you're going to drill around the tops of the bins, and then you're going to drill around the bottoms of the bins. So the tops of the bins, that's for aeration, and then the bottom of the bins, that's for drainage, as well as for the worms to be able to move through them. So for those who don't really know a lot about composting, basically it's an aerobic process, okay? So it needs oxygen. If it doesn't have oxygen, then like it can produce gas like methane, which is bad for the environment. So it's a process that needs aeration, and that's what the holes are for. Once you're done with the 2 holy bins, grab the 3rd bin, drill a hole for the spigot, and put the spigot in. This 3rd bin is for any leachate that drips down, and the spigot will, like, you can open the spigot and then the leachate will come out. That's the idea. A little side note that I want to add is if your bins have any cracks in them, which they shouldn't, but they might, because like me, that might have cracks in them. What I did to solve this is I heated up a nail on the burner and melted it back into place, okay? And you can do this as well, just be careful, like don't burn yourself, number 1, and then number 2, like wear a mask or like open the window so that you don't breathe in the fumes, or else you might get COVID. Now that you got all the bins ready, you're gonna take one of the holy bins, put it into the bin with the spigot, and then start adding your browns. I added compost, peat moss, egg cartons, and corrugated cardboard. Remember with the egg cartons and the cardboard to soak them overnight. Next it's time for the greens. Now there's plenty of things that you shouldn't add to a worm bin, and I'll just put that somewhere on the screen. Basically there's like a bunch of different things you shouldn't add to the worm bin with a bunch of different reasons behind them. For instance, like you can't put in oranges or limes because they might make the bin too acidic. Like, you can put a little bit of it in, but like don't put like 20 oranges every week, for instance. After you've got both of the browns and the greens in the bin, it's time to add your worms. Just put them on the top and they'll burrow down. Now, I got my worms from Uncle Jim's worm farm, and the first time they arrived, man, I was met with an unpleasant surprise.
Ready? Yes. Oh, that doesn't feel good.
The worms were dead. That smell was terrible, okay? And it only got worse as the days went on. So the moral of the story is this: if your worms smell like rotting flesh and they're not really moving, you probably have dead worms, okay? My worms were dead. Thankfully, Uncle Jim's worm farm has a live worms guarantee, and I was able to get a new batch of worms. I just threw out the old bin and then repeated the same process until I got, like the browns and the greens in there. The second batch of worms did fine, all right? They went in, they burrowed right down, and they were moving, which is a good sign that you have living worms. If they're moving, that means they're living. If they're not moving, that means they're not living. Easy to remember, right?
Look at that, they're moving. Hallelujah.
After the worms burrowed down, I covered the bin with some browns to discourage flies and topped it off with the lid. Now, I mentioned to you that I'd tell you why I chose to do this system, and I'll do my best to do it right now. Basically, the biggest advantage that you have with this system has to do with when the worms have turned the food scraps and the bedding into vermicompost. You don't have to sort out the worms. This system sorts out the worms for you. This is where the magic comes in. All you have to do is you take that other holy bin, the second one, and you fill it with browns and greens, put it on top of the finished vermicompost, and the worms will sense that there's food up there and crawl up the holes into that second bin. And after they've crawled up in there, all you have to do is take out that middle bin, and that's full of vermicompost for you to use. This means the days of you picking out your worms one by one from the vermicompost is officially over. So that's how I made my worm bin. Now, there are some things to remember. There's 3 things to remember, 3 big things to remember, okay? The big 3. And I'll just tell you right now. First of all is keep the carbon to nitrogen ratio at 50:1, okay? People normally feed their worms like once a week, and that's just with like food scraps and stuff. Like every once in a while, you're gonna add bedding in there, okay? Cardboard or peat moss or something in there so that the carbon to nitrogen ratio stays higher instead of like getting a lot of food in there, all right? Just food. The second thing is you're gonna need to keep the bin at room temperature, okay? So the Urban Worm Company recommends temperatures from 60 to 80 degrees. And then the last thing is to keep the moisture level around 60 to 70%, all right? So again, the Urban Worm Company says that if you squeeze a clump of dirt in your hand, it should feel like a moist sponge. Now, there's plenty of problems that come up with worm composting, but so far I haven't really had any problems. A great site to visit to get more information is urbanwormcompany.com. In my opinion, it's kind of like the king of all websites regarding worm composting. So definitely check that out. And I think that's gonna be about it for this video. So if you liked it, hit that like button, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace. No! Dang it. Just a little trail spice.